Oh, hello. My name is Mara and welcome to Books Like Whoa. Okay guys, it is time to wrap up a month of reading once again because we have come to the end of March. Now I'm filming this on the last day of March and I think I probably will end up reading at least one more book today because I've got like a lot of things sort of in progress. But we're just gonna go ahead and call it a day. If there's anything notable, I'll include that in my April wrap up. But yeah, March has been a good reading month in terms of volume and like getting through things I needed to get through for the most part. I do, however, think that having so many things that I need to read right now, just because I have a very high concentration of the arcs that I want to read this year in the kind of mid to late spring time frame, I think having so many things that I kind of have to get to right now is making me not enjoy things as much, maybe? I'm not sure. Or maybe I just have picked a lot of things that have been just like kind of fine, but not great. So yeah, that's kind of how I've been thinking about my month of reading in March, is fine, but not great. And I mean, I guess it's good. I didn't have anything, like my lowest rated thing this month was 2.5 stars. So like, it's not that I'm reading like terrible things. It's just that I haven't been reading as many things that just wow me. And I actually think that that's kind of true so far for 2019 in general, that my average rating is higher than it normally is, but my overall like major hits have not been as many. So I don't know, it's kind of just, I don't know. I'm in a weird mood with my reading, but all that to say, I do have things I want to talk to you guys about and I want to go over my stats, all that good stuff. So let's just dive into that. Okay, so in terms of how I did overall, I read 18 books this month. And actually, like I said, I think I'll finish at least one, if not two more today. So right in the range of kind of quantity that I typically or want to be reading. Not too many, not too few. So that was good. I read a total of 6,077 pages so far this month, with an average of 333 in terms of the length of the book. The average age of books for this month was 8 years, which is not quite my goal. I like to try to have the average age be closer to 10 years. But that being said, the average length of time on my TBR was 6 months, and my goal for that is to have books be on my TBR for less than a year. So like, not as good on the age, just because I was reading a lot of arcs, which we'll get to that. But really good on the average length of TBR. So that was great. In terms of what I was reading from my owned TBR versus things I was getting from the library or subscription or whatever, it was 14 from my TBR and 4 from the library or a subscription. So that was great. I made a good dent in my TBR this month. And I have to tell you guys, I was looking at my collection stats and I've actually gotten rid of more books than I have brought in this year so far. Like I've either read or just like DNF'd and gotten off of my collection. I think net -7 books so far this year. So good job me, the low buy is helping. In terms of where I got my books from, you can see almost half of my books came from publishers this month because, as I said, I've read a lot of arcs. Though I did have, I think, 3 from the library and 1 from Kindle Unlimited, so those are the ones that I didn't own, and the rest were sort of a mix of Amazon and used bookstore, other things. So pretty good blend of where I was getting things from. Then in terms of genre distribution, I read a lot of mysteries this month. So I read, I think, 8 out of the 18 books I've completed so far have been mysteries, and actually one of the ones I'm working on is also a mystery. It was March Mystery Madness, so I was thinking about that and trying to get through some of those. So a lot of mystery, and then just sort of a smattering of other things. It looks like contemporary romance was my next in line. That makes sense based on the arcs I was reading, as well as some general nonfiction, a couple of sci-fi, and then some fantasy, some genre blends, and a little historical fiction. So yeah, a little bit of everything, pretty typical. If you watch me, you know that I read it all. Read it all, love it all, hate it all, like it's all in there. And then in terms of my ratings, so ratings wise, like I was saying, I didn't have a lot of highs or a lot of lows. I did this month read the best book I've read so far in 2019, which got a 5-star. And for me, if you aren't familiar with my rating system, I only give a true 5-star to something that is an all-time favorite. If it is a favorite of the year, I give it a 4.5. And then if I really liked it, it would get like a 4. So that's just to give you sort of a sense of scale. My default rating is a 3-star. That means like met expectations, perfectly good, nothing great, nothing terrible, just like kind of in the middle. And as you can see, I had a lot of 3 stars. I had 6 of those this month, 1 2.5, and then 5 3.5 stars, 5 4 stars, and 1 5 star. And my average rating was 3.5 stars, which is great because in my world, if my average rating is 3 stars or above, it means I'm reading more things I like than not. So with all those stats out of the way, let's dive in. This was really hard for me to categorize my hits, disappointments, and surprises this month just because it felt like a lot of things were just sort of in the middle, as I was saying, but I think I've kind of parsed out a few things to talk about. So we'll start with my only book that I would consider truly disappointing, and then we'll work my way up from there. So the only book that I truly consider to be disappointing this month was DANSE MACABRE by Stephen King. Now, I had read at least part of this back in the day and had never actually fully finished it, I don't think, but I listened to the audiobook this time around because I got it on sale on Audible for I think like $4 or $5 at some point. And I think it's a 3-star book. It's not bad. It actually has a lot of like really great, like when he can focus, he has some really great sort of literary criticism type insights into a lot of things in sort of like horror or mystery genre media, books, movies, TV, all of that. The problem is that it's really unfocused and really kind of muddy. And so these little gems are kind of buried in a lot of just like all over the placeness. Now, this was written in 1980 originally, and I believe that Stephen King was still in the midst of addiction at that point, so I wonder if that has something to do with it, because as compared with On Writing, which is like one of my favorite memoirs, one of my favorite books of like literary criticism or writing how-to, this book just like doesn't even hold a candle to it. So I think you can see that Stephen King is somebody who has interesting things to say about the art of writing and about like criticism, like literary or media criticism. You can see the seeds of that in this book, but it's just kind of a mess. I will say though, probably my favorite little nugget he dropped on me in this was comparing the campfire story about the hook, you know, like the sort of urban legend about like 2 people making out in a car and there's a murderer on the loose who has like a hook for a hand and he comes after. He was comparing that to one of my maybe my favorite short story ever, which is A Good Man Is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor. It's like kind of a perfect short story in my mind. So just even that one comparison, I was like, oh, I've never thought about that story in that way. And I wish there had been a lot more of that in this book. Anyway, so it was disappointing, but actually I still wouldn't tell you not to read it. Like I enjoyed a lot of it. It just wasn't as good as he can do. Like I've seen him do better in this type of writing. Then moving into my surprises, and I could have had like half of what I read this month be a surprise just based on the fact that a lot of what I was reading was just not quite what I thought it was going to be. Anyway, the first one I want to talk about is Cliff's Edge by Meg Tilly, and I guess maybe this shouldn't be totally a surprise because I pretty much have the same reaction to this that I did to the first book in the Solace Island series, which is it is surprising to me how these books manage to work because the tone is so radically different in the 2 different parts of these books. So this series is equal parts small town zany rom-com and suspense, like serial killer suspense type books. And those are 2 very different moods. And there's something about the way Meg Tilly brings those 2 things together that I don't know that on a technical level is wholly proficient. Like, I'm pretty sure these were originally self-published, and I think you can kind of tell that because I think there's things in this book that normally editors would try to edit out. But there's something about it that works for me. I can totally see how this wouldn't work for everyone. Like, I don't think that these are books for everyone. These are open to criticism for sure, but there's something, I love both of those types of books. So it actually is quite pleasing to me to see them kind of woven together in a way that was just like really enjoyable. This also had like a contemporary romance trope that I quite like, which is a type of forced proximity. Like these 2 people are both staying in their friend/sister's house for a couple of weeks because basically the couple whose house it is trying to match make the two of them. So I kind of like that forced proximity thing. I like the whole like kind of a best friend sister type trope. Like there was, and I love a suspense. I love a rom-com. Like there was a lot of tropey things in this I really liked, as well as enjoying the characters. So I actually really like this. I gave it 3 stars because I think it's just sort of a weird book, and I don't know that it's a great book, but it's one that really scratches a lot of my personal like comfy reading type boxes. So if any of that sounds good to you, I would recommend this. Like, I think it's something unique. If nothing else, this is a unique series that I don't think we see a lot of in kind of the romantic suspense or the contemporary romance space. So like, if any of that sounds good to you, I would give it a try. Oh, and by the way, it is a series, but you could read either of these as standalones. Like, they're not super intertwined. The next surprise I want to talk about is, well, actually, you know what? I'll just say, let me go to one of the 3.5 stars, which was verging on a 4-star actually, which was HOTSHOT DOC by R.S. Gray. I read this as a part of my Goodreads Friends Pick My TBR, so I'll give you my full thoughts in my vlog whenever that comes out. Highlight is, I really enjoyed this. Like, I think I found a new contemporary romance author who does something I like. And when I'm in the mood for this kind of like voice in contemporary romance, would totally read again. So like, I appreciate that recommendation. I don't know that this is an author I would have tried without it. So like, my first outing into my Goodreads Friends Picking My TBR has gone well. And you'll find out more about that in my wrap up. But that was a little bit of a surprise. I wasn't sure how I was going to do with this one. And then the last surprise I wanted to talk about is Wicked Saints by Emily Duncan. So I did this as a buddy read with Bethany at Beautifully Bookish Bethany. And actually, I think we had really similar responses to it. And I think we actually both gave it the same rating, which was 3.5 stars. I'll let her give her version of it. So this is, I would say we had similar responses, but my opinion is my own. So you'll have to check out her wrap up to get her official take on things. But for me, my take on this is that the actual story of Wicked Saints is pretty basic bitch fantasy. It does have a few things thrown in to kind of mix things up, like it has more of a Slavic fantasy basis. So if you're somebody who really likes like the Grishaverse and you're looking for something to scratch that itch, this might work for you. So in that respect, it was like a little bit unique, but in general, like the actual story that happens in this book, I think is pretty standard. I don't think there's a lot of surprises. I don't know that there's a lot of choices in this in terms of like the story itself and even the characters themselves that is that unique. And in that respect, I would give it a 3-star. It's a first book, so I always want to give some grace to debut authors and the first in a series. So I think if you read the back and you like think it sounds interesting, you'll probably like this. I think it's well executed, yada, yada, yada. The part of this that actually is unique though is its thematic content. And that was far and away the most interesting part of this book. Yet somehow it wasn't making the story better. And I can't get into too many details because it would start to get pretty spoilery pretty quickly. But what I'll say is that so the themes in this basically have to do with religion. Like it is a religious, it's the middle of a war and the war is a religious one. I really appreciate seeing that in YA. I think that that should be in YA more because the underlying thematic content of this is the struggle between what you are taught to believe in sort of macro systems of belief or culturally instituted norms and your own personal experience of the veracity of those beliefs, if that makes sense. So like, I thought that being what the thematic content of this book was so well executed. And I thought that the way that those themes integrate into the story in terms of like structurally with what the heroine's powers are and some of the interpersonal dynamics was really well done, and especially by the end. I really liked how complicated that theme was presented in this book. So for that, I would give that piece of it like 4 stars. But the thing is as interesting as those ideas are, it doesn't make the story itself more interesting, which is, I feel like I'm kind of rambling and I'm not sure if any of that made sense. But just in terms of the pure story of this, it's kind of just standard fine YA that if you think it sounds good, I'd say go ahead and give it a shot. In terms of the ideas it's wrestling with, it's something I thought was handled really well, and the choices made were clearly very smart choices from the author that I really liked. So in that respect, it was more interesting. So I guess that's why I landed on a 3.5 of like, I do think this has a little something extra to it that I was very engaged with. in terms of like my intellectual engagement with the story, but on an entertainment level, it was just sort of average. So I don't know if any of that made sense and if that entices or doesn't entice anyone to read this, but I will say that it probably resonated with me a lot because a huge part of me kind of growing into my adulthood and my adult sense of self has been negotiating my own religious beliefs and my own kind of sense of metaphysics and personal experience versus what I was sort of indoctrinated to believe. Like, that was a huge part of my experience. And it's something I would love to see YA deal with more, because I think, especially depending on like kind of where you grow up, reckoning with your own religious beliefs is a really big part of growing up, I think, or it can be. And so I would love to see that dealt with more. And I really liked that that was sort of the thematic content of this. Okay, so then moving into my hits, first of all, I would say They Do It With Mirrors by Agatha Christie. This was a part of my Mission Marple rereads for the month, and I really liked it. It's not a perfect Christie by any means, and actually I think on a mechanical level it's quite deficient in some key respects, but just for what I like from Christie, I really liked seeing the parts of her I like best in a Miss Marple story, because Miss Marple, like just sort of the setup of those books doesn't always lend itself well to that. So I personally really liked it, even though I would not argue it's a great Christie. It was one I really enjoyed, and I have my full review of that up from last Friday, so you can see my full thoughts there. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. It's definitely my favorite new read in my Mission Marple read along. If you don't know, I'm doing Mission Marple, which is me doing a chronological reread of all of the Miss Marple books every other week. And yeah, so far, most of them have been rereads for me, but there's a couple along the way that I've not read before. This was one of them, and I really enjoyed it. Another book that actually, now that I think about it, I have in some ways similar thoughts about this that I do for Wicked Saints, but I liked this better in terms of my personal just enjoyment on a story level of this book, and that's Jane STEELE. This book is quite unique, I think, which I'd heard before, and now that I've read it, I see what people are trying to get at. I think ultimately, genre-wise, I would classify this as historical fiction that has a very strong mystery plot engine and is very meta in its narration. So it's not, I think some people talk about this as a retelling of Jane Eyre, and I think that that sets up not quite the right expectation, because I don't think this is really a retelling. It's more of an inspired by / like using Jane Eyre in a meta way in the text. I think thematically, this is 5 stars. Like, I love the ideas in this book. I do think that the first part of the book has a lot more energy to it than the kind of middle part. It's broken into thirds. I think the first third and the last third are much stronger than the middle third. And even the last third, it's more like the last half of the last third, last sixth, I guess. So I think pacing wise, I had some problems with this. And I think it definitely is kind of trying to achieve a level of sort of historical verisimilitude in the type of narration it has. And I think that's mostly successful, but there's some parts that are not as successful. But that being said, I just really enjoyed this. Like, I had a good time reading this. And like I said, the ideas in this, and I think kind of making me see Jane Eyre in a new light was a 5 star. Like, I really liked that it was bringing out this idea of like how we talk to ourselves almost, and sort of the stories we tell ourselves about who we are based on what other people tell us and our own experiences. I really liked all that. I also like that this brings in some queer elements to it, and it brings in some restorative race elements to it as compared to the original text. So all that being said, I really like this. I gave it a 4 star because ultimately I do think it's probably not quite a favorite of the year of mine, though if I'm thinking about it by the end of the year, maybe I'll change my mind. But I really did enjoy this, and I'm glad I finally got to it. I've been meaning to get to it for a long time, and I enjoyed it. And I've heard some very mixed opinions on it, so I'm excited to tell you that my opinion is much more on the favorable side than the not, though I can totally see why people would have problems with this. Like, I don't think this is a book for everyone, but it was a book for me, and I enjoyed it. We come to it. My biggest hit of the month and my biggest hit of the year so far, surprising no one in a very unoriginal opinion, is that I gave 5 stars to All Systems Red by Martha Wells. I loved this. I loved this. I loved it in terms of the actual story is engaging. It's exactly what a novella or short novel should be doing in terms of how it structures its plot and the amount of plot it tries to put in. I think it's really successful in building a world in a short amount of time without a bunch of info dumping. Thematically, I think this has such interesting ideas about like selfhood and self-determination and what it means to be free, and macro systems controlling us versus how much we have individual self-determination. Like all of that was great thematically. And then the characters though, the character of Murderbot is what bumps this up into an all-time favorite, because Murderbot is my heart. I think if you are somebody who has ever felt like there was something weird about you or wrong with you, or that you have like guilt about something from what you've done in the past, like Murderbot is just so relatable and I love it. I for some reason in my mind, I picture it as sort of like basically as a more like robot-y version of Sigourney Weaver in Aliens or whatever that movie is. I don't know what Murderbot actually looks like, but I adore Murderbot. Murderbot is my heart. And really that character, as well as its favorite human, are what take this from a 4.5 to a 5-star for me. And it's an all-time favorite. I just love it. And it's something I would point people to if they're trying to figure out how to write a good novella or short story, because I just think it is textbook execution of a genre-based short story, or like a more plot-focused short story / novella. It really understands how to do that well. So I will definitely keep reading the series. I doubt that any of the follow-ups will be as amazing as this first one was, just because that's how things tend to go, but it has a great mystery to it, great characters, themes, like it just was firing on all cylinders for me. Like, this is what I like. So good, would definitely recommend. Okay guys, surprising no one, I forgot to give you an update on how I'm doing with my challenges. So I did, in terms of things I actually finished versus things that I'm still working on, I finished 2 in-death books. I finished Creation in Death and Strangers in Death, which I gave, I think, 3.5 and a 4-star to. So those were pretty good. I finished Jane Steele, which was my TBR, my 19 books I want to read in 2019 from that. I finished that. I finished 2 books for my Mission Marple project. So I did a reread of A Pocket Full of Rye, and I read for the first time They Do It With Mirrors. And then I also read HOTSHOT DOC by R.S. Gray for my Goodreads friends pick my TBR. I have so many challenges going, guys. I probably overloaded myself, but them's the breaks. Okay. Back to the video. So yeah, that is my wrap up of March. Like I said, a little bit middle of the road, but you know, that's just how it goes. I did have a very high, so I'm thankful for that. And we'll see how April goes, because April is when like I really have to like read almost entirely arcs for May. So I don't know, I might get a little antsy in that. I don't know, I'm hoping I don't get put into a reading slump. I can kind of feel myself teetering on that, but I'm trying to give myself enough time before I have to have something read to be able to mood read within what I have to read. So I'm hoping that that will go okay. We'll see. But anyway, I think that that will do it for me. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. And I think that that will do it. I hope you're having a really lovely day, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!